H2O. Three characters that represent one of the most important substances for the sustenance of life and our environment. We commonly refer to this substance as water. We have plenty of it here in the Caribbean, yet so often we humans take for granted what our actions can do to the quality of the water, or how far the impact of our activities can extend. One way to evaluate this impact is through regular water quality testing. Grenada, the Molinaire-Beauséjour Marine Protected Area. In 2013, a study found that human activity in the upland communities and farmlands of this area had caused an alarming spike in the concentration of nutrient pollutants, particularly phosphates and nitrates. This spike is harmful to the coral growth that makes the MPA so valuable to both human and marine life. The Caribbean Aqua-Terrestrial Solutions Program has taken steps to address the issue. Their Natural Resources Management and Climate Change Adaptation Program is applying a Ridge-to-Reef approach. This involves educating and training farmers on sustainable organic agricultural practices, such as composting and alternative pest control mechanisms, which help to reduce the runoff of fertilizers, pesticides, and herbicides into the river. But aside from the 2013 study, there's been no way to see if any improvement had been made in both the Beauséjour-Molinaire watershed or the MPA. Enter Hermine Herman, lab technologist from the Caribbean Public Health Agency.
The mission here in Grenada is threefold. It first involves a hotspot assessment, followed by sampling, collection, and analysis. And the final component is training of community members, farmers, and fisheries and environmental health officials to continue the water quality monitoring aspect of this mission.
Select health officers from the Ministry of Health and MPA rangers were in attendance for the first week of Hermine's mission. Environmental laboratories and trained personnel capable of doing the kinds of testing Hermine needed are in short supply in Grenada. Thankfully, the National Water and Sewage Authority, or NAWASA, was able to give Hermine the space, equipment, and time she required to begin her work. Her first step was to identify hotspots along the Beauséjour River, where human activities could most affect water quality. Any pollutants introduced at these sources affect not only the water quality in the river, but are carried to the sea and impact negatively on the marine and coastal ecosystems. Locations were geotagged and GPS coordinates recorded so that they could be easily revisited. Next, Ms. Herman and her team of trainees began taking samples twice daily at identified locations along the Beauséjour River, one in the morning and one in the afternoon when human activity was highest. A separate team, led by the Grenada MPA Rangers, took to the seas close to the mouth of the Beauséjour River to collect samples. These would determine the final impact that all the river activity would have on the actual MPA. 2 samples were also collected daily, and all samples were brought back to the NAWASA lab for analysis. This process was repeated every day until Hermine had enough information to begin a baseline evaluation of the impacts that the activities in the uplands of the Beauséjour watershed are having on the water quality of the rivers and the MPA. The results were eye-opening.
The data that we have collected has revealed that there are high microbial counts in specific locations. The good thing, however, is that the test results for the MPA have all been well within recommended limits. So that is a good thing. The nutrient loading is extremely high throughout the surface water and in certain areas of the marine environment.
Based on the protocol concerning pollution from land-based sources and activities, or the LBS protocol, the results do not meet water quality standards for recreational water. The results indicate that the increase in the river pollution comes from 2 sources: improper wastewater disposal techniques from residential areas, and fertilizer runoff and animal waste from farms.
I need to also clarify that it's not a proper baseline, it's like a snapshot of what is happening within the watershed at that particular moment, because a proper baseline would require testing both within the dry season and the wet season.
Clearly, there's more work to be done. To that end, Ermine hosted 2 workshops. The first one was for volunteers in the communities of Beauséjour and the neighboring villages of New Hampshire and Willis. They were sensitized on the footprint that they and their neighbors leave on a daily basis, and trained in testing for nitrate and phosphate nutrients, as well as pH and temperature at specific points along the Beauséjour River.
I enjoy the day training very much because it is interesting to know what we put into the soil and how it can harm us as individuals.
To me, I find the training was good. It's special in its own way. I would like for more people to get the same training so that we could train each other.
The second workshop, held the next day, was for health officers and MPA rangers. They were trained in testing for nutrient content in river and seawater at the same locations that were mapped the week before.
They now will have to continue the monitoring aspect that was started throughout this mission. They have received equipment from the CATS program to undertake testing for nitrates, phosphates, and pH and conductivity as well.
A vital part of the water testing, however, is still missing: the bacterial component. A fully equipped lab, available at all times to the appointed water testers, is necessary to create a fully realized baseline from which the water quality of the MPAs can be analyzed. Fortunately, that issue is already being addressed.
And we are setting up a lab, a wet lab and a dry lab, where our staff, our technicians can do the test, collect the samples and do the test in-house. Because, it's not like a one-off thing that we're doing once every 6 months or, like before. We will be doing it regularly. So we must build that capacity, and, very shortly we will be working on a building where we will have space for a dry lab and a wet lab.
And once the lab is in place, many more MPAs and watersheds can be monitored. The personnel for the Woburn-Clarks Court Bay MPA have already been trained and are ready to maintain the ideal water quality for their respective areas.
We're hoping that the data that they accumulate throughout this process will help to inform certain changes that will be required if we are to reduce the pollution loads that we now see entering not only the surface water, but the MPA, which is the marine protected area as well.
For now, the Beauséjour-Molinare MPA represents the first step towards a regularized water monitoring system that can detect any fluctuations in chemical and bacterial content, enable action to rectify the situation before any long-term damage is caused, and chart the effectiveness of any corrective activities by the Ridge-to-Reef program. And for the first time, Grenada will have clear insight into the health of their most precious aquamarine environments, as clear as water can be.